The feeling I had reading this article was one of jealousy. You know, the jealousy that someone else got this amazing scoop that if you had just done the legwork, if you had just had your eyes open, maybe you could have gotten. So I take my hat off to you as a fellow journalist and a fellow writer. You really found something very interesting here, and it started on the donate page of a group called Black Futures Lab. Tell us about how your investigation unfolded.
So actually somebody tipped me off about this. I gave her name. Her name is Joanne. She's a graduate of the Heritage Young Leaders Program. And I went there, and indeed I looked at the Black Futures Lab, went on the donate button, and I saw that it linked. It said that Black Futures Lab is a fiscal project of the Chinese Progressive Association. And the Chinese Progressive Association may be obscure to some, but it has been a mainstay of the People's Republic of China for a very long time. It was established in 1972. As you know, Joel, 1972 was exactly the middle of the Cultural Revolution, Maoist craziness taking place in China. And they set up, the Chinese, the CPA was set up to promote the People's Republic of China, which is run by the Chinese Communist Party. This is mainland China. Promote its ideas, say it's a good place. This is in the middle of the Cultural Revolution, the middle of Maoism. And it has been, since then, it has continued to partner up with the PRC by doing events such as flag raising ceremonies or passport renewals with the Consulate General of New York. These two events were in Boston. The CPA in Boston, it has a chapter in Boston and one in San Francisco. So I think it is noteworthy, given the emotional support, the moral support that China gives to Black Lives Matter here in the United States, that a unit, an outfit that is U.S. based, and it's an American thing. CPA is an American thing, but it is a partner of the People's Republic of China. It partners with them on many things and it promotes their ideology. As you know, and I think the listeners know this, but I'm going to repeat it, there's nothing wrong. Actually, I embrace the sentiment that Black Lives Matter. Black lives, of course, do matter. It's the organizations. The organizations were created by Marxists. And this is not Mike Gonzalez saying this. This is them who say it. Patrice Couleurs, Opal Tometi, and Alicia Garza say these things, say they're trained Marxists. They don't like capitalism. They want to replace capitalism. And Alicia Garza, who I would say is the main one, right? Alicia Garza is of the three founders. She's the one that receives the most media attention. She's the one that set up the Black Futures Lab. And one more thing, and I'll stop for your next question, is that the Black Futures Lab is actually kind of a lobbying thing. It tries to change, it tries to suggest U.S. policy. So here, you know, I'm drawing all these links for you that I found.
All right, so it's been very difficult for anyone to figure out what the reaction has been from this Chinese group. They're called the Chinese Progressive Association. I think I may have said alliance earlier, but CPA, San Francisco, that's the main group. And if you go to their Twitter page, it's protected, which means you have to get permission from them to see their tweets and publications. This is a 501c3 charity that gets tax exemption, and they don't want us to see what they produce on social media. So that's a little odd. But let me just drill down. I'm going to ask you a couple of tough questions here. The Chinese Progressive Association was started several decades ago, and you link to a very interesting paper from Stanford University in 2009 on Marxists.org, and you quote, "The CPA began as a leftist pro-People's Republic of China organization promoting awareness of mainland China's revolutionary thought and workers' rights and dedicated to self-determination, community control, and serving the people." But there's a little bit more after those sentences. This paper also says its activities were independent of the Communist Party of China or the United States, and instead the organization worked with other pro-PRC groups within the U.S. and San Francisco Bay Area. So what they're saying in this paper is, at least when it started out, the CPA, the Chinese Progressive Alliance, was not under the control of the Chinese Communist Party, even if they were pro-Chinese Communist Party. So is it still the case that they're independent of China but supportive of China? Or at some point did they become controlled by China? What exactly is happening here?
That's very good. I don't know. You don't know. I don't know that you can be today or in 1972 an entity that partners up with the PRC and not have any dealings with the CCP. As you know, Xi Jinping is the leader of China, not really because he's the president of China, but because he's the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party runs China. The Chinese Communist Party equals China, equals the PRC. So I read that, and I couldn't make any, I don't know why it was put there. I guess back then in 72, the CCP was run by Zhou Enlai. But no, I'm pretty sure, actually. I'll look it up. I'm pretty sure that in 72, Mao Zedong was the general secretary of the CCP and its president. But even let's say it was Zhou Enlai was second in command to Mao. So today, there's no way that you can partner up with the Chinese government and be disassociated from the Chinese Communist Party. So, I was very puzzled by the way by how that was written. Now, as to your second question, whether this is an outfit that is based in the U.S., right, registered in the U.S., that is independent of China, just promotes China's policy, or an outfit that answers to China, that is also a good question. We can say, Joel, that it's an outfit that partners with the PRC because it did these two events, right? It did the Chinese flag raising over the City Hall in Boston, drawing protesters, I may add, and it did the passport renewal also in Boston at his premises. So that is partnering up, and at both events, the Chinese Consulate General of New York traveled to Boston for these two events. So that is working in tandem with the PRC. That's clear as I can make it.
Let me push back on that just a little bit, because you've talked about the Boston event where the CPA in Boston worked closely with the consulate in Boston. But I've seen elsewhere people have said that the CPA chapter in Boston is independent of the CPA in San Francisco. Do we know that this San Francisco organization, which is the one sponsoring the Black Lives Matter group, do we know that they're connected to the Boston group?
What I have read is that it's got chapters across the country. It said the CPA has a chapter in Boston and San Francisco. If you read descriptions of the CPA, it says it has a chapter in San Francisco, has a chapter in Boston. Then there's another description out there that says that it's got chapters across the country. I wasn't able to find any more chapters. I only found the one in Boston and the one in San Francisco. Now, if you're saying that the CPA in Boston and the CPA in San Francisco are independent, well, I mean, Lydia Lowe, one of the founders of the San Francisco chapter, spoke at the Boston CPA event, and she's out there. She's the one that wrote co-wrote that essay in Left Roots, in which she says that she wanted Chinese Americans to play a revolutionary role. So she spoke at the Boston event.
We're speaking with Mike Gonzalez, the author of an extraordinary article in the Daily Signal about how a Black Lives Matter co-founder is partnering with a pro-communist China group called the Chinese Progressive Association.